Have you ever considered having another child? Hi, my name is Filla Gerwitz, and One More Child is my story of personal growth and a journey of faith. In this book, I share snippets of my life and the reasons for the choices I made early on in marriage to limit our family size. However, the Lord had other plans, and eventually we made a decision to have more children, and this changed my life forever. I invite you to read One More Child, which is available on Amazon in print and Kindle.
This is a production of the Ultimate Homeschool Radio Network. Welcome to the Vintage Homeschool Mom Show. Your host, Filla Gerwitz, is an author, a publisher, and your radio show host. She will encourage, educate, and inspire you with answers to your most pressing questions from homeschool, marriage, parenting, and much more. Felice loves to equip moms to live a Christian life because every moment counts. Be sure to visit her website at mediaangels.com. And here's your host, Felice Gerwitz.
Hey everyone, and welcome. This is Felice Gerwitz with an episode of Vintage Homeschool Moms. And today on the line, I have a very special guest. And I am going to introduce her by way of our past affiliation when I knew her as Amanda Gross. So Amanda was homeschooled and was a good friend of mine's daughter. And she and my daughter, Christina, were the best of friends growing up. And so now she is married, has a whole group of little ones of her own, and is living in Minnesota and is an expert, if I can say that, on using essential remedies with her family. So welcome, Amanda.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you. Yeah, and so you have a podcast, Simple Blessings and Oils, and that is simpleblessingandoilspodcast.com. You can find lots of episodes there that Amanda has done, and that is over on our our sister network, the Ultimate Christian Podcast Network.com. And you can find, like I said, all of her episodes, and she's done I'm looking here, about 26, and everything from easy steps to minimalization, to minimalized and summer essentials, all the way to all things fall and oil pulling and intermittent fasting. So Amanda, you kind of run the gamut of things that, would be of interest to moms who want a simpler way of life and also to be able to use oils and natural remedies. So, Amanda, how did you get into this? First of all, tell us how many little ones you have, because between you and my daughter, I lose track.
We have 8 children, ranging in age from 16, and our youngest one will be 2 here in a couple of weeks. And we homeschool. My husband he used to work construction and all that jazz, but he's actually worked on an organic dairy farm since he was in high school and has been back there for 11 years almost now, full time. And then he volunteers on a fire department. And I would have to say, when I first started having kids, I moved out and I grew up in a pretty natural household. I don't really remember going to the doctor growing up. We went to the chiropractor. That was our doctor, Dr. Mark. I remember distinctly his name. And I remember the first time I went to the dentist, I was older, and I only remember going like once as a kid. Don't really remember going often, but I had really straight teeth and really good teeth. And I don't know. I don't remember the doctor being a thing in our household. When something happened, Mom usually had some sort of a concoction or a natural way of doing things. And my grandma was always into vitamins and herbs and just natural living. And so when I grew up and was having my first baby, I knew a little bit about like how we had done things, but then at the same time, I was here on my own, going to the doctor, and you did what the doctor said to do. And there was things I wasn't completely comfortable with, but because I was just like, well, they're the doctor, I'm not. I don't really know. And I had my mom in one ear and other people, and doctors in the other ear telling me things to do. And until I just had that gut feeling that something wasn't right. So when baby number 2 came along, I really started to question things. And as baby number 3 came along, we started diving into homeopathy. And I remember using homeopathy growing up. We had this little kit Mom had. And so when you had, a boogery nose or something, you would use this remedy. And so we started diving into homeopathy. And my husband was the one who saw the quickest results. He had a lot of seasonal issues and had done all of the pharmaceutical things. And he just had to keep doing them in order to feel better. So when homeopathy came in, it was just like this huge light bulb went off. We started eating healthier. We started really watching what we were bringing into our home and realizing that chemicals and things like that were actually causing us to be sicker. And then when baby number 5 came along, a friend of mine called me out of the blue and said, "Hey, I'm having this essential oil class. Do you want to come?" And I thought, "Oh, I've heard of oils. I've heard of lavender and peppermint. Sure, I'll come check it out." And so that was almost 8 years ago, and we started using essential oils. And it's just kind of been a spiral effect as to how we can keep ourselves healthy. God gave us all of these tools to make ourselves healthy. And no, if you break a bone or, something gets smashed, there is a reason to have doctors there. But I think as a culture, we've gotten away from figuring out what's really wrong, whether it's, as simple as a common cold or, having a toxin in our environment. And we just kind of expect this magic pill to fix everything. Where if we fill in those little gaps in our diet or gaps in our immune system with things that God's given us, we can God made the body to heal itself. And it's been very freeing and very good for our whole family. So yeah, it's kind of how
and it's funny because, our stories are, pretty diverse as far as that goes, because we just always took our kids to the doctor and it was just a given. And then I ended up getting really sick at one point, and, talking to your mom who, even though you guys live in Minnesota, your mom tries for any excuse. I always tease her about coming back as often as she can. And so, she came and was telling me about it and gave me an essential remedy that really seemed to make me feel a lot better. And I have just been using them ever since and really like them. So they are, a big help to people. And so let's say someone is listening and they think, well, this is great, but it's just too overwhelming. And I remember being at a meeting with some people, and this one poor lady could not breathe. And I happened to have like little samples of the oils in the car. So I gave her, there's one called Breathe. And I just said, just put it on your chest here. And then she texted me later. She was an attorney. And I didn't know she was supposed to go to court. And she goes, I smell like oil. She goes, but I don't care. I can breathe now. And I'm supposed to do a deposition or whatever she was doing. And she goes, I want to know more about it. So I sent her to the website and she looked up a bunch of stuff. And she goes, she was busy. She goes, I just can't learn all this stuff. Can you just tell me? So you do some of that, where you live in Minnesota, and you share, like through essential oils and parties and things like that. So what about someone who wants to learn? Obviously, I would say one of the things is to go to Simple Blessings and oilspodcast.com, and you can learn from Amanda. But what if they just wanted to get started? Are there certain oils that, people should use or keep on hand?
Most people find that the most beneficial is what they call a premium starter kit. And with that premium starter kit, you're kind of given the gamut of essential oils that most people are going to use. It has things like lavender in it. And lavender is like the Swiss Army knife of essential oils, because when in doubt, you grab lavender. It also has things like Raven, which is another respiratory help. So whether you're, I do commonly, like at least once a month between my Facebook group or my online, I will do my website, I will do a quick run through of those basic essential oils that pretty much every household should have, because it really is geared down to about 10, 12 oils that if you have those, you have a really good basis for them. And a lot of people are overwhelmed when they start with essential oils because they're going, I don't even know how to use these. And I love to tell people that that is why our premium starter kit does come with a diffuser, because the diffuser is the easiest way to get started with oils. You know, you just simply put them in the diffuser and let it run. And whether you're looking for, like, you've had a really stressful, tough day, or whether you're looking for some sort of immune support or respiratory support, or you just want your house to smell good, they're all ways that are benefiting not only your whole body, but it also benefits the people around you. So, like I said, you don't have to have 600 oils to get started with oils. You just need that little bit of a handful of them to get you going. And that little, like I said, that little starter kit has 11 oils in it, and they all will help with things like relaxation, muscle support, respiratory support, immune support, skin support. So whatever you're looking for, typically one of those oils is going to cover it. And you can find the link for that particular kit on my website, www.simpleblessingsandoils.com or simpleblessingsandoilspodcast.com, either one.
Mm-hmm. Great. And so, also, Amanda, you have your Facebook link on here too. So you can go to facebook.com/simply oils mama. And then she's got her simpleblessingsandoils.com, which is her main website. So you can find more information there. And interestingly, we were talking beforehand about different ailments and things like that. And you mentioned something that I found really remarkably eye-opening, and you were talking about emotions and how that could be a direct cause of some of the physical ailments, which really makes sense, right? Because God created us as an entire being, not just, our body and our soul, and we're not a bunch of little separate entities, but we're just so integrated, and how we feel and has to do with a lot with how we act and things like that. And so you were sharing about how feelings can lead to medical issues. So share a little bit about that with us.
So that has been my new path in the last probably 6 to 9 months. I have really learned, especially dealing with my own kids and their personalities and how they deal with particular situations. You've got one kid that's really, really quiet and doesn't say anything, and then just like that, with a drop of a hat, they just fly off the handle. And so I started looking and learning more about how our emotions are actually tied to every system in our body. So when we have something as simple as like a shoulder ache, or something wrong with our foot or our knee, or we know we have a thyroid issue, or we have something in our kidneys, it just doesn't feel right, or our liver, all of those physical ailments are actually tied to an emotion. And so I've been doing more and more research, because there's just been people in my life that have come up and, are dealing with situations in their life, and it just doesn't, first you're going, well, I've tried every cream, I've tried every salve, I've tried every medication. And what it ends up being is it's an emotion that they haven't dealt with. And when we don't, emotions are great. God gave us emotions to be angry, to be happy, to, be joyful. But when we don't properly deal with those emotions, or express those emotions, or recognize those emotions and move on, we end up storing them. And wherever those weaknesses are in our body is typically where we store them. And so there's been a ton of research that has been coming out over the last, 5 to 10 years. And what they found is that the emotional center of the brain only responds to the sense of smell when releasing stored trauma and emotion. And what's really interesting about that is that emotion is something, when we have stored trauma, or when we have trauma happen in our lives, or say something happened to our parents or our grandparents, it can affect them to a DNA level, a cellular level, where it can be passed on. So this summer, when I was listening to another, she's very natural-minded, grew up in this midwifery community, and she really did think essential oils were kind of whack, which is funny in my opinion, because when you grow up in like this natural realm of things, you just think they must be, into oils. She went to a class and they were talking about essential oils and emotions, and she kind of was smelling the oils and just kind of like, that one stinks, and very like not accepting of the oils at all. And one oil came around and she smelled it and she immediately broke down and started crying. And she knew at that moment, and when you hear the history of the story, she knew at that moment what it was. She was dealing with the trauma of what had happened to her father. Her father had passed away 2 weeks prior to this. And when her father was younger, he was actually sold as, he was what we would call today sex trafficked. He was kept in a different room than other kids, and she knew it, but he grew up to be a very good man, a very, believed in God, very religious, and she knew in her heart of hearts that he was with God and in heaven. But that trauma that had affected her father had actually affected her in a way she was not aware of. It had actually been holding her back in life. And so when she smelt this oil, it immediately released these emotions she had been holding back for years and years. And that was her, what you would call aha moment with essential oils. So the research, there was, the New York University provided some research on the amygdala gland, which is the gland in our limbic system of the brain that stores and releases trauma in the body. And it says that, according to this research, that the amygdala does not respond to sound, sight, or touch, but only releases emotional trauma through the sense of smell. So I have been experimenting with my kids. I've been experimenting with my husband. And
you have a few of them
myself,
to try them out on.
Yeah, wow. With myself, and even with when family members have come up with different, whether it's things like... Tell the story about Sue Meyer, because you guys may know Sue is on our Ultimate Homeschool Radio Network. She has Homeopathy for Mommies podcast. And so Sue Myers is friends with Amanda's mom, Sue Gross. And I met Sue Meyer through Amanda's mom, who they used to live in Fort Myers. I don't even know if we said that. I guess we did. You guys were growing up together. But So Sue has like an in-person storefront in Minnesota, and knows about oils and knows about essential remedies. But you said they were having an issue with one of her grandchildren. So share about that. I was up there helping. Sue is having an event at her store, and I was doing scans, and the scans help to. They measure frequencies in the body, and then they help to figure out what oils would help to balance the body out. And so one of her grandsons had this rash on his face, and it had gotten so bad and flared up that it would bleed at times. And it was just on his cheeks. And then when I scanned him, he scanned for an oil called Sacred Mountain, which is a highly emotional oil. And I just kind of, looked and I said, this, born very naturally.
How old is he, Amanda?
What was that?
Amanda, how old is he?
Oh, he was about 6 months old at the time.
Okay.
And so he, when he scanned for this emotional oil, I was just kind of thinking, he's 6 months old, what would he have to be emotional about? And so I just kind of had asked Mom, what had happened? Did he fall? Did something, traumatic happen to him, or when did this all start? And she's like, well, he's had it since he was about 2 months old. And no, he didn't fall. He didn't do anything like that. And what had happened was he had a tongue and lip tie. And so they had that revised. And with that tongue and lip tie, you have to separate the skin so that it doesn't adhere back together. And so she, as Mom, had to go over every, I don't remember if it was 2 or 3 hours, and swipe around his mouth so that the skin wouldn't adhere. And she said it did get so bad at one point with the healing that he would cry when she would walk towards him. And so I said, well, he is holding that emotion and that fear in him because of what happened. And he just doesn't know how to properly deal with it. That's what he's doing with it. And it's coming out on his skin as a rash. And so she took the oil, and I said, it's really simple with kids. Kids are not complicated. They don't overthink things as we do as adults. And I said, so all you have to do is apply the oil on the bottoms of his feet, because the bottoms of our feet are have all the VitaFlex, so it covers every organ of the bottom or of the body on the bottoms of the feet. And then I said, put a little bit right between his eyes on his forehead. And when you're nursing him or when you're feeding him, just tell him that he's safe and that he's loved and that he's comforted. And you can just repeat those things. It's not anything complicated. And as mom, I just said, you need to let that go too, because I know, having kids of my own, the guilt I would feel because of having to do something like that. But she had to do it, because when you have a tongue and lip tie, you don't eat properly, you're not getting the nutrients you need, and all the the things associated with the tongue and lip tie. And so I told her to let that go, and then in turn help him to release it. And this happened to be on a Saturday with the event. And that following Thursday, she sent me pictures, and she's like, I never knew how, she goes, I don't know what it is with essential oils, but I believe. And the rash was completely gone. A rash that they had been dealing with for 4 months, using all the natural things you could possibly think of. And it was all that emotion that a little baby didn't even know he was storing in. So it was just so eye-opening, like, wow, this really works.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I know. Well, as Christians, we know that, the Bible talks about the sins of the fathers and passing it on through generation and generation. And I know as Christians, sometimes, you hear these things going, well, homeopathy is all new agey and so are oils, and I don't want to get involved with things like that. And it's that, when something comes into your house, I don't care if it's a package or, something that you're unsure about, you just pray over it. I pray over computers that are not working, and miraculously they start working. And, I had to record one of our, I'm part of a women's ministry, and I've never had such trouble with a recording as I have had with this one. And, taken me over 2 weeks to get, 150 CDs and double, because she went 35 minutes over the time that it will fit on a CD. But, it's just been one thing after another. And I finally just said, today I said, this is ridiculous. We're just going to pray over these CDs. God is God of everything, right? So we're going to give him all the honor and the glory and just pray. So, even in Sue Meyer's book, Homeopathy for Mommy, she talks about praying and asking God to intercede and help you decide, what you should do and what remedies and things like that. So, just remember that, a lot of homeopathy uses natural remedies, things that are available from, plants and extracts, and that before doctors, in Jesus' time, they had things that they used, like you were saying, your mom and her concoctions, that we use. I know my grandmother used things. One of my granddaughters was over this week, and her stomach was hurting. So I pulled out the little container of organic bay leaf, and I, boiled some water in a kettle, and I poured it in there, and I said, let this steep. And she goes, wow, it smells really good. And anyway, she drank, about half a cup of it. And of course I let her put sugar in it. She's a kid. And so, what's not to love. And, and it really helped her. It helped her stomach. So, I just want to throw that in there, Amanda, because I know that, a friend of mine was, a mutual friend, Maria, is on the other coast, and she, same thing. We were out to dinner. I happened to have I keep a little, it's like a keychain version of like a little of the miniature oil. Yep. And her daughter was super sick. She has a lot of allergies and things like that. So ended up just giving her my whole little, case. And she was just like, oh my gosh, by the time we got home, she felt so much better, and I want to know more about it. So whenever she tried to have parties in her area, she was getting a lot of flack from, other Christians who were saying, oh, this is not of the Lord, and da, 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 da. And to me, it's like, so is it better to go to the doctor and get shots or whatever, with all this toxic stuff like the flu shot. My poor dad used to go get them because he always wanted to get them because he was older, and he was sick for weeks afterwards. And I remember, like, as he was nearing the end of his life, he was like mid-80s. I remember, I think he was like 83 or 84, and he's like, I'm not going to go get this flu shot. And I'm going, I don't say, yes, Daddy, that's what I've been trying to tell you, you know. And so, like, if he did start to get sick, we would just, you know, use the essential oils. And I'd say, you know, I want to put this in the bottom of your feet and then put on socks and go to bed. Annie, in college, is using them. And everybody this whole semester has either had the stomach flu and she does the homeopathic remedies too. And she'll text me in a panic. Everybody's coughing around me. What do I take? You know, I'm like, same stuff that I tell you about, you know. And so, you know, put some stuff on the bottom of your feet. And so she hasn't been sick at all. And so, you know, it's just you know, and her friends now want to know more about it. So, you know, it seems like, you know, a good thing to me to use a more natural product or remedy rather than to use something that has, you know, unpronounceable words or that says on the side. Yeah, have you looked at the cold medicines at the store? Look at the side effects. Could cause manic depression, you know, suicide. But I mean, it goes into all of this stuff.
It's crazy. It is crazy. And for a family of 10, that's one thing I always tell people is we have a high risk over here, in my opinion, with the number of people in our house and the cesspool that it tends to turn into, that somebody's going to get sick. And we really, it's not that we never get sick, but when we do start to feel, you know, like we're getting something, we have this like arsenal of natural options between, you know, elderberry syrup, essential oils, homeopathy, you know, herbs and tinctures. It's crazy, but you take them and you feel better. And my husband, when he gets into like oat dust, because that's like dust are his trigger, and he'll come home and he'll be like, I need you to scan me quick. And I'll scan him and I'll oil him, and he can't believe how good he feels in the morning. So being the biggest skeptic that I had in my home was my husband, and I love him, and I love his mother's a nurse. And so I had that the opposite, you know, like as I had to, you know, like make my case in some ways. He's always stood behind me. And when I've told him why we do things, he is 100% been behind me. But when you grow up in a like I said, my mom just did things like naturally. And when you grow up on the reverse side, it was kind of the collision of two heads when we first, you know, were figuring things out. And, you know, do we want to vaccinate? Do we want to do this? Do we want to take a, you know, antibiotic, or is there a better way? You know, like, how is this going to affect our bodies? Yay, you know, so this little pain is gone, but then a week later we end up with something else. Is that how we want to treat it? Or do we want to try something that isn't going to have a side effect and it works just as quickly? So, yeah, I don't know.
Well, Amanda, I have loved talking to you. We are out of time, but I want to invite our listeners to go to Simple Blessings and Oils podcast with Amanda Filla. You will be blessed. She is a walking encyclopedia of knowledge. And on each of her podcasts, you can always leave a comment or message her, or you can join her Facebook group and get to know her better. And also, she is available to help you with your problems. So, Amanda, thank you so much. God bless, and thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. Have a great one.
Thanks for tuning in to the Vintage Homeschool Mom Show. Visit Felice at MediaAngels.com and TheVintageHomeschoolMoms.com. Vintage Homeschool Moms is a production of the Ultimate Homeschool Radio Network.